The format for tonight is really simple. We'll hear an overview of our historical arc from one of our vice principals, Mrs. Michelle Trudeau. Following her, we will have classroom teachers and specialists speak for 3 to 5 minutes roughly on their subject matter and their topic of interest that they cover during the school day. And then once that concludes, once all the staff members have had a chance to share about what they do and why they love it, then we'll take questions and answers. So that's pretty much the format. And as Mr. Curry said, if you are not comfortable asking a question right away, don't forget we do have a chat on the side. So I'm going to begin by introducing Mrs. Michelle Trudeau, who was one of the original founding members of our curriculum committee 13 years ago when we started this campaign to start teaching classical liberal arts at St. Jerome's. And she's been with us in a variety of capacities and has a really depth and wealth of understanding on the entirety of the curriculum. So she's going to kick us off and start. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Danny. Hello, as you said, I'm Michelle Trudeau, and I plan to give you an overview of our core curriculum here at St. Jerome Academy. Let me set the backdrop for you. Imagine it's the beginning of the school year and you're in 4th grade. The previous year in 3rd grade, you studied the Middle Ages, how Christianity rose up in Europe after the fall of Rome, the various religious orders like the Benedictines, Franciscans, and Dominicans. You read about the courage of Joan of Arc, you studied the architecture of castles, and wrote about the relationship under feudalism. You learned about the role of knights, the invasion of the Vikings, and the launching of the Crusades. You studied various animals and their habitats. You learned the great chain of being and your multiplication tables. This year in 4th grade, you'll be studying explorers and how they were both alike and dissimilar to the missionaries and crusaders you studied in 3rd grade. You'll travel with them to China, Africa, India, North and South America while studying maps and map making. You'll study the solar system, the earth, and the oceans. You'll observe how the art and music of the Middle Ages changed during the Renaissance. You'll study inventors and their inventions, the upheavals during the Age of Enlightenment, and life during the Industrial Revolution. You'll get better at answering the question, whom did they serve, God or Mammon? And all the while, your moral imagination will be formed by reading good literature that highlights the themes and problems of what you're studying. This is a snapshot of what happens here at St. Jerome Academy. A decade ago, St. Jerome's was very different. It was a school with a declining enrollment that looked like it might have to close its doors. At the time, several people approached then principal Mary Pat Donahue and suggested that St. Jerome's adopt a classical curriculum. Among those proposing this were college professors, high school teachers, and professional writers who had seen the gradual decline in competent writing and critical thinking. Over the years, they had read student papers that used poor logic, made weak arguments, and had fragmented sentences. And they wanted their students to learn not only to write well, but to think well and speak well. 12 years later, the switch to become a classical school has proven to be an important decision, not just because SJA didn't have to close its doors, and not only because our enrollment has increased, and also not because it has sound techniques. It's important because in addition to all of these things, it is a resounding answer to the question, what is education? In the seminal book, Classical Education, authors Veith and Curran explain that a classical education is essentially timeless, since it is grounded in human nature and in the nature of learning. It offers a framework that is disciplined and liberating, open to the past and to new knowledge. Classical education aims to find the good, the true, and beautiful across the liberal arts and sciences. It cultivates wisdom and virtue by liberating the mind and feeding the soul through what is observed, pondered, learned, and understood. It integrates the subject so that the people and stories throughout history, most importantly, Jesus Christ, are continually being discovered. Indeed, in our Catholic school, we strive to see God in all things. The beginnings of Catholic education are rooted in the Church Fathers. More than any other institution, the Catholic Church has a historical claim to classical education. As early as the 6th century, there was an attempt to gather classical writings and use them in Christian formal schooling. Over the century, theologians and teachers from Thomas Aquinas to Elizabeth Ann Seton have written about what should be included in a Christian school. A natural question arises. Isn't the study of the ancients a part of another place and time? Because this education is rooted in human nature and human endeavors, it is open to all questions that we humans pose, both in the past and in the present. With the study of salvation history as its centerpiece, the SJI teachers take the students through different times to observe, learn, and explore. It uses the liberal arts as its substance in an integrated way. In kindergarten, children learn about ancient Mesopotamia, the Egyptians, and Israelites. Besides a vigorous memorization schedule, they have diverse hands-on work in nature studies and math. Of course, they also learn basic skills such as handwriting, reading, beginning drawing, and listening. And they have PE 3 days a week. In first grade, the students study ancient Greece, where they learn that the Greeks were very competitive, always striving for excellence. They start the year by studying the Greek myths and follow the Trojan War and the Odyssey in literature. During the year, they learn to contrast the Israelites' knowledge of the one true God with the Greeks' many gods. They learn about St. Paul preaching in Athens, study the chart of the natural world where they compare and contrast plants and animals, and memorize many poems. Second grade is the Roman year. This year takes the students from Greece to Rome, where Veni Vidi Vici is the theme. And Miss Bacon will tell you more about this year. You've already heard about the third grade's theme for the glory of God and the fourth grade's theme, whom will you serve, God or Mammon? The fifth grade is the American year. Students begin with colonialism and end with the abolition of slavery. They learn Antonio de Montesino's sermon about the American Indians, which the Spanish priest to the Indians, de las Casas, first heard, in which Montesino says, "Are they not men? Do they not have rational souls? Are you not bound to love them as you love yourselves?" What begins with the study of human dignity in colonialism continues through the American Revolution and the Civil War, and all the time these questions are being asked. They learn quotes by Saints Augustine and Aquinas, whom they've previously studied, in the speeches of Dr. Martin Luther King and the context of America. An unjust law is no law at all. In 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, they repeat the historical cycle by taking a more in-depth approach to what they learned in kindergarten through 5th grade. In 6th grade, we go back to the beginning and study the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, and Israelites. And in 8th grade, they study modern times, capping it off with the study of America. Our 7th grade year is the study of Christendom, which spans the gap between these 2 years. Dr. Roberts will tell you about nature studies, and Mrs. Orhan will explain mathematics in the curriculum. Recently, I asked a graduate from St. Jerome Academy how her education set her apart from her high school peers. What were the differences she saw? She told me many things, but one thing that really struck me was a comment she made about her honors Brit Lit class. She said she was able to enter into discussions with 16th and 18th century poets like John Donne, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and understand what they meant when they talked about wisdom, beauty, truth, and virtue. While many of her classmates struggled to understand the analogies and metaphors, she was able to think, speak, and write about them. Her ability to imagine these themes within their historical context and yet to still find her place within this world is the gift that we give to our children. As parents and teachers, it is the best educational inheritance we can pass down to them. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Really appreciate it. We'll now go into the portion where we have our staff describe a little bit about the curriculum year that they cover, maybe some of the subject matters that they provide during their general instruction, and also talk about maybe some of their. We're going to start with the youngest grades and work our way up. So we will begin with Sister Mary Seaton.
Good evening. My name is Sister Mary Seaton, and I have the privilege of teaching first grade at St. Jerome. And I have a lot to tell you in just a few minutes, but I consider it a great blessing to teach at the school and also to just be part of the foundational level of the children's, the formation of their intellectual skills. And this comes out in many ways, from the math and reading, which are foundational to any first grade, but I find that it's different at St. Jerome in that what we do is not just about learning these facts, learning to add or subtract, for example, in math, but just really developing their skills of observation, their skills of listening, and looking carefully at things to see what are to compare and contrast. Then with our literacy program, of course, reading is a big part of first grade, but we have a remarkable literacy program that integrates reading, spelling, phonics, handwriting, grammar. And I find that it's really remarkable in the sense of what these children are learning in their understanding of the English language and all the rules and the whole part of it together. Also, Michelle mentioned that our historic year is the Greek year, and we have great fun with that. Today is a great example because this afternoon, my first grade class surprised the sixth grade class, who also is the ancient year, and by coming to their door with a Trojan horse. It was made out of cardboard boxes, but we snuck the horse right into their door. And then the first graders crawled through it, shouting out in Greek, "We have arrived, we have conquered." And then they came in with great victory. And then we recited our poem about the Trojan horse for the sixth grade. And it was really a wonderful experience. And I think it shows a lot of what happens at St. Jerome in just the whole unity of the classes, the history part, that what they're introduced to in first grade, it comes back around again and it will come deeper as to the other historical years. And just the great fun in learning, and even the memory part. For example, the poetry, the poem that we did for the sixth grade today. We memorize a lot of poems, many of which are integrated with things we're studying in history or in nature studies. Our nature studies is chiefly plants and animals. And one thing that we do as we learn about the different creatures and just wonder at God's order and beauty is that we draw these things. So from the seeds that we learned about at the beginning of the year to lately it's been crustaceans and now getting into fish. So we'll draw things, and it allows the students to take a certain ownership and love in that beauty because it kind of just comes in and out of them. So a lot of great things happening in first grade. For religion, of course, is a big part of our day because it's all centered around Christ. And we love to take visits over to the Blessed Sacrament regularly. And I think that's about all I have for you in a nutshell this evening, but it's just wonderful.
Thanks so much, Sister Mary Seaton. Really appreciate you sharing about our first graders. Next, we're going to go over to Miss Margie Bacon, who teaches second grade, and she's going to talk about the Roman era. And she's getting over a bit of a cold, so she's honor and notable for just being here with us tonight. So thanks, Miss Bacon, for joining us.
Hi, thanks, Danny, and hello to everyone. How are you? I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the second grade year, which is the Roman year, as you've heard. Our studies begin with the founding of Rome and the legend of Romulus and Remus. We then go on to learn about Rome as a kingdom and all the political changes that happen as Rome becomes a republic and later an empire. We study the Roman emperors, which gives us a great chance to talk about virtue and lack thereof. Under the umbrella of Roman history, we talk about political structures, we talk about the Roman military, the emperors, some of the social classes, and the different features of Roman culture, such as architecture. We are able to use poetry and songs and even the way we dress to celebrate the Roman culture. And every year has some feasts to celebrate their theme. So we have a Roman feast, and the kids really enjoy dressing up. And with the sixth grade and Mr. Clerks, we're able to share our Roman poems and songs that we've learned throughout the year. And I guess my favorite thing about second grade is that it's a sacrament year. So we get to learn, about all the sacraments, but specifically about reconciliation and communion with the kids. Second graders are an awesome age because, their reason is developing. They have lots of questions and they're extremely honest, which can bring about a lot of discussion. Since our curriculum is just very fluid, we're able to use things like different literature selections to, incorporate the faith, incorporate nature studies, and incorporate even our Roman studies, because we have some, I guess I'll loosely call it historical fiction, where, the books take a fictional character and place it in the Roman times. And it kind of gives the kids a context that they can relate to, because usually the main character is a child their age. So it's just fun to grow and develop with them throughout the second grade year. Thanks for your patience with my voice today.
Great job, Ms. Bacon. Thanks so much for sharing about the Roman era and our second grade class. And I'm glad you brought up feasts, because that takes place throughout multiple grades and classes getting together to share and to celebrate the various cultures that are represented within the time periods that are studied. So great. Next, we're going to go over to Mr. John Archer, who works in the next age group up. That's third, fourth, and fifth resource, but in a slightly different capacity. But I wanted him to share about what he does and how he works with students on a day in, day out basis. Mr. Archer.
Thanks, Danny. Hey, so as Danny said, I'm John Archer. I work with third through fifth in resource. In the resource department, we take Zacchaeus as kind of our patron or inspiration. So if you remember the gospel story, Zacchaeus climbs the tree so that he can see our Lord better. And we see our role as enabling or trying to make the curriculum as accessible as possible to as many students as possible. So we primarily work with students on literacy and math help. We have 3 resource teachers. Eddie Beal does 6th through 8th. Ruth Abbey does K through 2nd and also helps out with Montessori. As our sort of inward facing component, we develop plans for accommodations and services for students. We pull out for extra help if students need to in small groups. And then we also push into classrooms to facilitate their learning in the general education setting. As Sister noted, we use a fantastic literacy program in the general education setting for K through 3rd. And then we also supplement that with the same program and then other Orton Gillingham methods that we've learned throughout the years. For those of you that know anything about phonics programs, Orton Gillingham is kind of the, can mean a lot of different things, but has become sort of the gold standard for teaching kids with dyslexia to decode words, and also kids without it to decode words. As our more outward facing component, we help facilitate evaluations and services through the county and the public school system, but also try to help parents connect up with private practices if they want to go that route for evaluations. And just on a on a side note, my daughter is in Sister Mary Seaton's class, and I got to see the invasion of the 6th grade. And I've been a parent of an SJA parent longer than I've been a teacher there. And one of the most beautiful things I think about our school is the way that the school transforms your home. My daughter has been reciting these poems for this invasion for a couple weeks now, and getting ready for her poetry party tomorrow. So I think I know her poems almost as well as she does at this point. But yeah, so if you choose to send your child here, you will be blessed with many songs and poems and stories at the dinner table.
Thanks so much, Mr. Archer, for sharing that unique perspective, both as a parent and a resource teacher in our building. So really appreciate that. Great. Next, we're going to go over to Mr. Will Clerks, who is our 6th grade homeroom teacher and actually has the largest amount of content to cover within his academic year. So I'm sure he'll do a deep dive into some of that for you all. Mr. Clerks.
All right. How much time do we have? No, I'm kidding. Danny knows I could talk for too long, but so yes, I teach the 6th grade year, and Chris, if it's all right, I'm going to try to screen share here. We'll see how that goes. Would that work? Okay. Go ahead. Okay, is everyone seeing the screen with the SJA logo? And you can hear me? Good. Okay, great. So far, so good. With Zoom, that's half the battle, right? So I teach the ancient year, and I'm going to go ahead and just put a question up here first. So this is, for me, this is my 3rd year teaching 6th grade. And it's always a development. Every year you're sort of learning. And, that's part of what makes St. Jerome so great, is that the teachers are learners as well, that we are students, and then we get to do that together. And it's something that we're always developing. So I'm not going to pretend that this is sort of a set in stone kind of thing, especially when you get to the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade levels. I think this is true for all the teachers, but especially when you get, I think, to the logic stage, what we would call the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade years, there's a lot of content to cover. And there's always sort of an ongoing question of what makes the most sense with this group of kids? What makes the most sense this year? What do they need? And how can we sort of serve that need? You start with certain principles, but then you have a freedom to adapt around that. And that's part of the beauty of the classical model that we have. So this is the question, or one of the questions that kind of animates what we do in the 6th grade. It's from arguably one of the church fathers, a guy named Tertullian, who lived in the early centuries AD. And he said, what has Athens to do with Jerusalem? What has Athens to do with Jerusalem? And so this is sort of the famous question that, a lot of scholars have written about, Father James Shaw, others that you may have read or heard of. And really what this boils down to for 6th grade is, what do the Greeks, these pagan thinkers who lived before God, who knew not God, who worshiped a pantheon of different gods, what do they have to do with the one true God? And how can they help us? Can they help us at all in thinking about God? I would include the Romans in that, because we say, what's the word here? The Romans conquered Greece, but we say that captive Greece conquered her captors, right? I forget who said this, but it's sort of the famous idea that much of what the Romans took in terms of art and logic and thinking and philosophy really is an imitation of the Greeks, which is not, a dig on the Romans. It's, they see something good and they adopt it. It's much like what we do in the Catholic Church, right? You see something good, we say, if this is good, it comes from the one true source of all good. It comes from God, the Logos. So we baptize it, we take it into the church. And if it's truly good, it stands up to the test of time. And so what you can see here is the 6th grade, yes, is the best. I mean, it's the best year. It covers the longest spans of time here, depending on how you slice it. It goes from creation all the way up to, ideally 475 or so AD, which is around the time of St. Augustine. Realistically, we usually make it up to about the 1st century AD before the clock runs out on the year. So we go from BC, the time before Christ, all the way up into these years of our Lord, the Anno Domini. And so we spend a lot of time in the beginning of the year thinking and talking about, first, as was mentioned, first principles. What is history? What does it mean? Does history have a purpose? Where is history going? How do we measure time? What is time? And Merrill, Dr. Roberts can talk about this as well when we talk about nature studies, but different teachers, some who I won't name on here, will, like myself, frequently pose a question that we have no intention of fully answering, send the students down to nature studies, and let Merrill or Michelle Orhan or their math teacher, their nature studies teacher, whoever it is, kind of continue to work through this with him. I know one of my students today, we started talking about, well, I'll show you in a minute. I'll show you in a minute with regards to that. A few slides that just show a couple pictures from class. So this is from back in December this year. You can tell that we were studying some of those different Greek gods, just going through different symbols of the Greeks. And so we get to see some of those in person today. When the first graders came up to our classroom, they were dressed as Demeter and Poseidon, and I think we had an Athena as well. So it's just wonderful. As is mentioned, one of the benefits of sixth grade, getting to overlap with so many time periods, is I get to work with and interact with a lot of the other just wonderful teachers throughout the school day as well. You can see Mr. Flynn teaching some of the boys here. We have some different ways that once we get into the logic stage, 6th and 7th and 8th grade, we also start to teach theology of the body in different ways, sort of an introduction to what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? And how does that lived out in grade and age appropriate levels? Okay, so this is a picture of 2 animals, and I'm gonna not make anyone unmute right now, but this is sort of to get back to the question that we posed today. And this is just to give you one sort of instance of something that happens in the classroom, right? Just want you to think in your head to put a name to the image that you see here, to these 2 creatures. I'll give you that, they're creatures, these 2 fuzzy creatures here. And I'll tell you, you can't see the back legs, but they both have 4 legs, they have ears, they have fur, they have snouts. Now I'm going to show you another picture of a creature. This is another creature here, and I'm purposely not saying much more than that. So put a name to this creature in your head. I'm going to show you another creature. This one is a cute creature. And I think I've got one more. Oh no, I have more than one more. Here's another creature. Now I want you to start to notice, what do these creatures have in common? And how are they different? Here's another creature. This one is kind of looking right at you. It's got you fixed between his or her eyes here. And then we have one last creature here. Now these are similar creatures for the most part, but one of these creatures is not like the other. I'll go back because this one scares me a little bit. One of those creatures is not like the other, and I hope you knew which one it was. Could someone, one of my colleagues here, maybe if no one else wants to, unmute yourself and tell me what you noticed just briefly? So I take my word. I guess I will call some people out here.
There's some big green eyes.
Some big green eyes here. Yeah. Okay. So Dr. Roberts, since you're unmuted right now, which one of these is not like the other, would you say? Green eyes, a different one?
It seems as if the one with green eyes seems different. The facial structure seems different. I think I could name off a few things.
Okay.
So I would say that was
Facial structure. Maybe you could see sort of like the whiskers here. You can tell a little bit.
I can't see his tongue.
Yeah, that's right. These other guys have their mouths open. Well, this one doesn't, but you can see the teeth down there. So you can make an argument that there's a lot in common, even including that last one. But Mrs. Orhan, if you had to put a name to the first set of creatures, except all the creatures except for that last one, what name would you put to them?
I'd call them dogs.
I would call them dogs too. That's good. We agree on that. Maybe if you speak Spanish, you'd call them perros, or if you speak Latin, you'd have another word. I have to look up the Latin word for dog, but that's
Canis.
right. What is it? Oh, canis, of course. Great, thank you.
Mrs. Smith's not here to get on.
Yes, that's right. Our Latin teacher's not here to help us out here. Great. So you see all of these things, and you see that they're all different. No one of these pictures is the same. In fact, I don't think any of them are even the same color. They all have fur. They all have ears. They all have teeth. They all have eyes of some sort. We could just list off all these different things, and it almost seems too obvious to point out, because you all knew right away, well, those are dogs, and hopefully you recognize that last one is a cat, the insidious animals that we have to coexist with. Apologies to all the cat lovers out there, but these are dogs. And so what is it that makes those things dogs. Now, I'm not going to just pose that rhetorically here, but if we were in a classroom, we would go on and we would try to talk about this. And maybe you'd say, okay, well, they're four-legged and they have fur and ears. Okay. Then I could show this picture again. And if I zoomed out a little bit, you'd see this is also a four-legged animal with fur and ears. Then you say, okay, well, they have teeth that you can see. And then I'd have to go and find a picture of a cat that's has its mouth open and you can see it has teeth. And we'd go back and forth and we'd go on and we continue to talk about this. And what we're trying to do here is something that is essential to what we would call the logic stage here. Now, we don't have time to go through all of this, but there's three basic stages in the model of classical education. Model's not the right word, but we talk about the grammar stage, where the teachers who already spoke are giving the grammar of being, the grammar of learning to the students. In other words, the building blocks, the symbols, the words, the kind of repetition, the poems, the songs, all the things that need to be remembered. From there, you move into the logic stage, which is really mostly about reasoning, putting these things together, taking them apart, analysis. And then finally, and this is more towards high school, you move into the rhetoric stage. A really simple way to think about it that I've heard explained to me was kind of like breathing in, sort of taking the nutrients you need, taking the oxygen that you need from the air, and then breathing out. So there's an inhale, you're learning, you're taking in what it means to be alive and everything that there is in the world. You have this process of finding the connections between everything, taking them apart, putting them back together, and then you're exhaling. How do you speak about these things persuasively and beautifully? Sixth grade is really about the logic stage. It's the beginning of that into seventh and eighth grade. And so the thing that we're doing here with all these pictures of these different canines is really trying to understand, as we talked about it today in sixth grade, what is dogness? In other words, is there an essential nature to a dog? What does it mean to be a dog? Now, today we weren't talking about dogs. We were talking about, we think we started with a chair. So what is chairness? And one of our students told me that chairness is just a concept. It's just an idea. And so that student actually got to sit on her conceptual chair for the rest of the day. Her physical, tangible chair was confiscated. And so she went down to Dr. Roberts' classroom. And I don't know if you guys talked about it at all, Meryl. Maybe you can add on to that sort of thing. But this is the kind of stuff that goes on in sixth grade, the kind of stuff that goes on in St. Jerome's. And so whether we're getting through history and we're talking about the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, the Israelites, and just going back over that historical arc, whether we're in sacred history, which mostly covers the history of salvation, so a lot of the Old Testament, all the way up to the Gospels, about where we end, and a little bit into Acts of the Apostles and the preaching of Paul. Whether we're doing sentence structure and diagramming sentences in English, or talking about vocabulary, different Greek words, nature, natura, the Latin word that kind of prompted all this today. Or there's one more thing that I teach that's escaping me right now. We've got history, we've got sacred history of religion, we've got grammar, and now I'm going to embarrass myself. I've got literature, of course. So this is the problem. The literature is so ingrained with the history, so tied in, that we're reading the Iliad, we're reading the Odyssey, we're learning about some Greek tragedies right now. And so those are things that, you know, it's just so much a part of the air that we breathe in and breathe out there that, yeah, it's just a great place to be. Anyway, I could go on. I'll stop there. Thank you guys for your time, and thanks for looking at some pictures of dogs here. So.
Mr. Clerks has brought the classroom to Zoom by way of dogs and cats. So thank you for that sample little lesson there on comparing and contrasting beings, right? Great. Well, we're going to jump up and talk in this last two groupings here about math and science. We're going to start with Mrs. Michelle Orhan, who teaches 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math. So go ahead, Mrs. Orhan.
So just to follow up on Mr. Clerks, actually, Mr. Clerks, I think it was me that they came to after that conversation, because the moment they walked into my class, they went, Mrs. Orhan, is a chair a thing or a concept? Like, as they were walking in the room, they wanted to continue that conversation. They were arguing, and unfortunately Beatrice had been taken out of the room for something else, and so she wasn't there to like argue her point, but they were all very heated about that conversation. So it definitely does continue past your class, which I think is a really interesting thing to note. Dr. Roberts and I actually do it a lot to each other. I send my kids down there and tell them to ask him some kind of, little bit of out there question, ask him to prove it, things that they're arguing about, that, you know, I once asked them, well, you know, one third plus what, or 0.9 repeating is the same thing as 1, right? Because 1/3 as a decimal is 0.3 repeating. And so 0.3 repeating plus 0.3 repeating plus 0.3 repeating has to be the same thing as 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3. But with 1, you would get 1, and with 1, you would get 0.9 repeating. So I made the comment and then I sent them away. So they went down to Dr. Roberts and continued that for I think the entirety of his whole next period. But it's a beautiful thing that we can do that to each other, because it allows them to get my perspective as their math teacher, but also their science teacher's perspective. And, you know, it's, and then Mr. Clerks pulls them into those conversations, and our 7th and 8th grade teachers are very willing to do that as well. So it's a beautiful, you know, thing to see in the school that the kids want to carry that information that they've learned from one teacher and see and get another teacher's perspective. And it does happen a lot. But so back to who I am. My name is Michelle Orhan. I've actually been at the school since before we were classical. So I've been there for over 20 years now. And I got to be a part of the, you know, transfer over from kind of your traditional, but failing, unfortunately, Catholic school to the beauty of what we have today. And I will say that as a parent who has had a student go through the school, she's in high school now, but as a parent, but also as an educator, the change from the only thing I ever knew as an educator to the classical education has truly been eye-opening for me as a parent, but also for me as an educator. I just didn't know what I didn't know about how children learn the best, and truly what it takes to, you know, educate the whole person, right? It's not enough to just say, oh, here's some information, just learn it and you'll be ready for life. But really, we want to prepare our children, you know, for eternity, not just for the things of this earth, but for what is truly to come. And so mathematics, I'll focus on mathematics, but our ideals for mathematics are for the kids to start off in the grammar stage, like Mr. Clerks explained, you know, learning those basic skills, and to help the children access it in the way that is best to them. So we use the Singapore math method, not because we think Singapore math is the end all and be all, but because of the beauty of the structure and the presentation. So the idea behind Singapore math is simply that there are 3 different stages in any understanding, a true understanding of a mathematics concept that you should go through, starting with concrete, right? That hands-on, let me do it, right? Like I can tell you all day long, you know, the beauty of our curriculum, but until you see it, until you actually engage in it, right? You learn more and you learn better by actually doing. So in mathematics, that's the manipulatives, getting things out and actually just observing how the world works, how numbers work, how, you know, numbers even came to be. And then once you've done the concrete, you move to a more pictorial representation. And so that could be, you know, telling a story about how the numbers are working. And those are your kind of, you know, understanding of word problems. And it looks different at different stages. But that pictorial, you know, representing the things that you've just touched, the things that you've just, you know, manipulated, and seeing them visually. And then finally, we move to the algorithmic process, right? That 3 plus 5, you know, and a line, and then just this blank, which really, to our minds as adults, we understand it now. But to a child's mind, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, this little thing is just, you know, the symbol that we use to represent 3 of something. But 3 of what? 3 chairs, 3 computers, 3 people, right? Or maybe 3 grains of sand, right? From vast things to minute things. You know, the understanding of what 3 is could be vastly different. So what we want our children to do is not just jump right to that algorithmic process, to not just jump right to the, you know, okay, here's a math problem, just solve it for me. our children still have to learn their math facts. They still have to come to the algorithmic process, but it's how we get them there. So from kindergarten through 5th grade, they use the Singapore method. And then once they're out of the grammar stage and they come to myself and Mr. Beal, who is one of the resource teachers that Mr. Archer was talking about, we start to move them from just the basics, the skills of mathematics and the physical understanding of mathematics. And we want to have them start then, truly understanding the why of mathematics. That to analyze the number and the way that their world actually works and start taking all of those basic skills and the beauty of their learning in the younger grades and take those skills and be able to apply those things to the world around them. So every year in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we do a geometry unit. Actually, I'm in the geometry units with all of my classes right now. Because I think we do a disservice to our students when we leave out geometry, right? It's not enough to understand number, but how number works in the world around us, right? Creation wasn't just a mistake. Creation was a beautiful gift from God. And by using number and geometry together, we can analyze more fully what we typically use beautiful words to describe. Right? That is what all of the historical time periods focus on, the beautiful words and the beautiful ways that people understood the world around them. And so when they come to me in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I want them to start using shape and number to understand more fully the world around them. Do we still do basic facts? Do we still do basic understanding of math? Absolutely. But along with that, my students get a little sick of this sometimes, I think, but I ask the question why all the time. It's not enough to just be able to do a sheet of math problems. You have to be able to talk about their application, the why, so that when you're in the high school level and you're taking all those mathematics skills and applying them to science, you see, right, how those two things go hand in hand, how the sciences and mathematics are really meant to grow together. It's why I can pose questions to them and send them down the hall to Dr. Roberts, and and they can continue those discussions and they can really get joy through those discussions because they're constantly throughout their curricular years being asked to ponder mathematics and not just to memorize mathematics, which I think a lot of us have done, right? That when we were growing up, the way we understood mathematics was, here's a process, let me teach you how to do it, and now go do it. But the application, the understanding of why that works is just as important. And so that as they go into the rhetoric stage, as they leave us after 8th grade and move on to the rhetoric stage, they are better equipped to truly be able to take in what's happening in their scientific and mathematical studies.
Thanks so much, Mrs. Orhan. Really appreciate it. And that's a great segue to jump over to our last panelist, Dr. Roberts, to speak on nature studies in the middle school. Take it away, Dr. Roberts.
Great. So I'm supposed to follow all of that stuff. That's thanks for letting me go last, Annie. I'll only take about 45 minutes to try and follow that stuff. What you can tell from my classroom, everyone, since I get to play cleanup here, is that basically everyone else abuses my lesson plans for their own good, right? So I'm having to do Mr. Clerks' classes for him and talk about conceptual chairs, and I'm having to discuss decimal representation and infinite summations with the Mrs. Orhan's math students. So you wonder whether we ever actually get to do nature studies or not. But don't worry, I get back at them and I send the students back down with science questions to the math and 6th grade rooms as well. So we have a happy rivalry going on around here. One of the things that we like to say at the school is that really the life of the school in a lot of ways is the active intellectual life of the faculty. That the faculty is a community of learners, and that we're really inviting the students into that. And I hope that even though we're here on Zoom, one thing you can see is that that's alive and well, even if it's just for a little gentle teasing back and forth across the screens. That these are my good friends. A lot of times, I should say, I'll introduce myself momentarily. I came into the school along with Mr. Flynn, along with the curriculum change. So this is my 13th year. We were already living in the neighborhood. And I was pleased to, while I was working on my doctorate in physics at Catholic University and doing my research at Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, I was able to work here in the middle school, work through my PhD, and now that I've been done for quite a while now, continue to work here, because what I came to find out was that I just loved teaching middle school science, which is not something a lot of people say. But here I am. And so one of the wonderful things I found was this was a glorious community. And so some people, and now I should say that I've been teaching here for 13 years, but now I've also had many a child in the school. So my oldest, Alan, is in the 8th grade and about to graduate, and I've got a 5th grader and a 2nd grader, and more coming in. So I can speak from both the parent and the teacher side. And some people ask me, like, what's it like at St. Jerome's? I say, well, it's sort of like homeschooling with 25 of your best friends. Like, it's like having my kids go to school with all my with all my favorite people's kids, and having them teach them too. So it's been just a glorious experience for me. So I hope some of that's coming across, even though we're sort of here in the Zoom screen, as it were. So just a couple of moments on nature studies. I love that Mr. Flynn put me last, because I tend to talk longer than any of these people, and he put me here to put pressure on me, which was wise. It's a good managerial position. So a little bit about nature studies. We've heard a lot about history, and you hear a lot about literature, and you hear about classical things. You think to yourself, okay, but how do the mathematical sciences, how do the natural sciences fit into these things? So I've been beautiful to hear Sister, especially, and the lovely things that she does with nature studies. And it's lovely to hear the nature studies come up over and over again, but it is really integrated into the curriculum, and it's really become a beautiful part of what we do here at St. Jerome's throughout the course. And I can say that both as somebody who works with these teachers and somebody who's seen my students come out with a real love of the natural world. So when they asked me for sort of my codified speech on nature studies and how it fits in St. Jerome's curriculum, my answer is always this: the main objective of the nature studies program is to develop a sense of wonder about the natural world, that wow feeling, that oh my, that feeling that you're in the presence of something sublime and something which you both don't understand but wish to, right? There's something wonderful about the natural world. And then when that experience comes, not to leave the student there, right? So often it's like, wow, okay, but now what, right? And it's a wonderful place, but it's a wonderful place to start, right? That we want to develop that sense of wonder, and then teach the skills that we need to pursue answers to the questions that wonder naturally elicits, right? So often the natural human process isn't that amazing? I wonder how that works. And then if it's really amazing and you really do wonder how it works, you might decide to devote your life to trying to figure that out, right? You think about great researchers, you think about great scientists who spend their lives trying to figure out answers to questions they may never see the answer to, but they think it's worth pursuing. That's what we want for our students, right? So in the nature studies program, I'm hoping that we can elicit that wonder and then have them question and say, how does that work? How are we doing that? What is going on with that animal, or what's going on in that biome? And then have that motivation to work through the skills, because the skills aren't easy, but but somebody developed these things, and we work through these processes because it's worth it, because the knowledge is good for its own sake, right? So if this is the goal, if wonder that leads to questions that leads to motivation for skills and content is really the work, then this necessitates an emphasis on detailed direct observation, precise and accurate thought and speech, and personal hands-on experimentation, rather not necessarily reading about what somebody did, but actually, as much as you can, doing a lot of these things yourself. And because of that, and I know this is always scary in a parent in a teacher meeting, but I like to say it up front, so you know, there isn't an official nature studies textbook. The way nature studies works at St. Jerome's is that we have an integrated laboratory curriculum. So it's a hands-on program. Each unit is a set of lab activities, and the student keeps their own work binder, just as they would if they were a working scientist, right? And so we talk about what we're going to do, we discuss what we're going to do, we look at the lab materials, we do the experiments, we do the activities. We have 8 groups do the activities, and so everybody knows that means we get 8 different answers out at the end. And then we have a discussion about why we got 8 different answers and what the experimental errors are and how we can go about these things. And then we have some sort of cleanup at the end. And each one of those experiments, each one of those class activities then sort of builds on each other the way you would go about a real scientific investigation. And so by the end of the unit, what the students have is a record of their own work. And that's what they use to review for assessments and to review things and try to remember things and put things back together. they're going to record their observations there, and the other half of that, right, is training the observational skills that lie at the core. And that comes all the way through the curriculum, all the way from kindergarten, as you heard Sister talk about, first grade, all the way up through my class, through an emphasis on detailed observation. Now, you can sort of ask for a list of things. Look at that thing and tell me about it, right? And often it's really hard to get the words out. And so what we've come to find is the most natural way to elicit better and better and better observation is, as Sister Mary Seaton mentioned, is to draw it, is to have nature journaling. And so the nature journal becomes a major part of the curriculum all the way through the school. And the reason behind that is that in the end, the goal of the nature journal is not improvement in your artistic ability, although that comes as a beautiful kind of natural consequence of constantly drawing these things and working on these things, but rather an attendance to the detail, to the reality that's there, but that we tend to kind of gloss over or walk by. So we spend a lot of time with the students rendering things, recording our observations, making sure that not only are there drawings, but there's verbal descriptions. And okay, but tell me more about that thing. What's the next part of reality can you write down? Okay, you drew that blade of grass, but what about the next blade of grass? And how do those things relate to each other? And a lot of the things Mr. Clerks was actually doing is stealing my thunder and sort of saying, okay, how many details can you get? What's the next detail? What's the next thing you could do, right? And to always ask the students to go deeper and deeper into the observational reality, because of course, for experimental science, the better your observations, the better your results are going to be. And in fact, going back and making sure your data taking is excellent is one of the best ways to make sure that your results are solid and sound. And so this really the two legs here is sort of a hands-on experimental curriculum, and then we sort of try to help our method of observation with a lot of nature journaling. So we're outside a lot, we're looking at images a lot, we're trying to draw things as best we can, and to sort of have this sort of professional binder and this sort of more personal sketchbook. And so there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of back and forth. Just to give you a sort of window, I didn't prepare a PowerPoint, but I can tell you like what's going on this week in nature studies. I'm teaching the 5th through 8th grade. This curriculum does run through the rest of the school, but you know, in 1st grade, Sister's doing the nature studies. In 2nd grade, Miss Bacon's doing the nature studies. And then when they get to 5th grade, they come to me. So the 5th grade was talking to me about they're preparing for their end of the unit test on weather. So today we were discussing the interactions between air temperature, air density, and the air's relative humidity, and how those things, and air pressure, and how those interact with each other. So when the temperature increases, what happens to the air pressure? Then because of that, what happens to the density of the air? Because of those two things, what happens to the air's capacity to hold water? And what does that mean for relative humidity? And what does that mean then for what's going to happen as far as how it feels in that particular weather thing? So we were discussing all of those different interactions. 6th grade is finishing up a simple machines unit, so they're working on the Rube Goldberg machine projects, and we're looking at all the simple machines together to make to sort of sketch out a Rube Goldberg machine, right? Which is one of these super complicated machines to do something simple like open a door or flip a page. 7th grade is working through the historical process of the discovery of basic chemistry. So right now they're just figuring out why we name certain elements the way we do, and sort of going through the mess of different ideas about what things are made of and trying to get the elements straight. And 8th graders, in fact, speaking of mathematical stuff, the 8th graders were talking about map projections today, because we're trying to figure out latitude and longitude and plot volcano and earthquake positions in order to sort of represent for them the discovery of the Ring of Fire around the Pacific Rim, and therefore the sort of discovery and verification of continental drift, and then again plate tectonic theory that sort of explains the motion of the Earth's crust. And so we were talking about different map projections and exactly how you take the curved spherical surface and make it flat, and what kind of give and take you have with the different map projections. All those discussions, that was just today. That was going on today in nature studies. So it's vibrant. It's a beautiful program. I really love doing it. And I think it's a lived out example of how the natural sciences can fit, not just shoehorned into a beautiful classical curriculum that focuses so much on history and literature and theology and sacred doctrine, but also how it belongs there and sort of enriches and enlivens the other pieces. And I'll say one last thing. I know I'm over my time as usual. The other part to this is that I really want the students, when I talk to parents about this, I often say, I'm much more interested in the students come out thinking scientifically and having that habit of mind than that they have any particular set of content. The content comes and the content is good, but I want them to be able to think scientifically, to be comfortable with their ignorance, to be comfortable with the fact they're going to make mistakes, and to be able to approach things scientifically in an excellent fashion. And one of the best ways to do that is to put them through this process of experimentation and figuring out their errors and things like that, but also to show them what a lived life of sciences looks like. So we do a decent amount of history of science so that we can see, what did Lavoisier's life look like? What did, we're doing anatomy and we're looking at Galen and what it was like to be a doctor in ancient Rome in the time of Marcus Aurelius, for instance. And we're looking at all these different lives of all these different people who have devoted their lives to trying to discover this, sort of crack open the secrets of nature and of reality and creation. And I think what that does for them is they can be hard, it can be frustrating to sort of be wrong a lot and be searching for more things and realize how much you need to know about the natural world. And it's encouraging to see what a good life lived in the pursuit of the understanding of the natural world really looks like. And so we have a really emphasize the history of science, and it's easy to see how that sort of binds itself into the rest of the curriculum, but it gives us a real touchstone for what a life looks like. And so then we can turn to the student and say, okay, if this is wonderful for you and this is something you would like to do, this is the blueprint. This is what the life looks like. And you too, this is an open question. Here's the open question in solar physics. Here's the open questions in biology. Here's the open questions in chemistry. Is it you? Are you the one that wants to go pursue these things? And I think it's that kind of inspiration that sort of gets people thinking about maybe STEM careers and maybe devoting their lives to these kind of things. So I'll stop there. That's the nature studies curriculum. And
thank you, Dr. Roberts. Great. So you've got a chance to hear from the various subject matters and developmental stages of our homeroom teachers and specialists throughout the building. So we'll take some questions now. We have some time. And if you're more comfortable, again, in some ways, it's a little bit easier to see the question in the chat. That way people can see it all at once. And I'll try and summarize many of the questions so that for the point of the recording, folks can have it there too. So the first one is about the difference between classical kindergarten and Montessori kindergarten curriculum. There's some nuanced differences. I would say they're still learning phonics and math, beauty and wonder in both areas. I would say the delivery and the format is quite different in terms of within the Montessori setting, they're following the full philosophy of Maria Montessori. So it's very child driven, looking for mastery. So they're taught lessons in a small group instruction by the lead guide within that setting. And then they continue to work with it until they've achieved mastery and they continue on to the next deeper level. Our traditional kindergarten room has a more formal, I guess I would say traditional setting to it, and that there's larger students. I don't mean size-wise. What I mean is numbers of instruction happening all at once. So the kindergarten teacher will still be teaching math, still be teaching phonics, reading, all of these components. But it's not obviously with Montessori work, tangible goods in their hands. It's a different format that's used. So they have some workbooks for some things. They have a lot of worksheets for other things. And that's a simple way of explaining. I don't know if, someone else answered in the chat, so that's even helpful. Great.
I would just add just one little thing is the hope is that a lot of the content is similar. It's not as if they don't learn about the cradle civilization. It's not as if the Montessori students aren't doing a lot of that classical content. It's really some delivery differences and pedagogical differences, which I think is what a lot of what Mr. Flynn was saying. But the hope is that there's a different focus, but it's the hope that a lot of the content and the learning, especially the skills, are hopefully the goals are the same.
Okay, so the next question says, how does the curriculum reflect the history and culture of people of color, both in ancient times and in modern history? And are there opportunities to build critical consciousness around social injustice? So this is one aspect that I would say is a linear answer. It's long term. So by going through the historical arc, presuming a child stays from kindergarten through 8th grade, there's great emphasis and depth brought in through studying Western civilization. So they get to study various cultures over a long period of time. And the crux of the matter is looking at, I would say, a high emphasis throughout every single time period is the effects of the culture on the human person at large. So I would say it's not grounded or founded in any one particular soul culture or any one group of people. I would say it's broader and wider than solely just that. It's a study of the effects on the culture on that given time. So there's a greater emphasis, I would say, on like date to date and what took place within those time frames in terms of how that unfolded. But it's a deep dive into what made the people think, what influenced their thoughts, how were they changed and moved by the existing culture that they were in, also by negative impacts and negative influences. Certainly the false notion of slavery that persisted throughout the world for hundreds of years and its effects on man during that time. That's a short synopsis. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in there and add anything to that.
I'll just add just briefly, this is something that we've talked about and we think about as a faculty, and we're always working on it. So as a white guy, I'll say that like one of the things that we've talked about is Danny talks about slavery here in American history, and I don't teach American history, I teach ancient history. And so it struck me in conversations with my colleagues about this, two different things. I'll kind of tackle this America and I'll tackle the other stuff. So ancient history. I spent most of my time, historically speaking, in the 6th grade year in Northern Africa, in the ancient Near East, in the Middle East, around the Mediterranean. And so, yeah, I mean, in Greece, in Rome. And so a lot of these different places, whether we're talking about St. Augustine, who's from North Africa, whether we're talking about, different Mesopotamian kings, or what have you, a lot of this is in, as Danny mentions, many different places, comes from many different cultures. And so it's treated linearly as well. With respect to America, the reason I kind of jumped in here, I don't teach this, but just this afternoon, I was listening to what's become kind of a common refrain almost amongst our 5th grade teacher who teaches the American year, Amy Clayton, and our 8th grade teacher, Alan McGinn, who teaches the New World year, including America. And they're both at about the point where they're getting to Lincoln's 2nd inaugural address, which came during the Civil War. And the analogy that Mrs. Clayton always uses about slavery is that slavery is America's original sin, and the Civil War is the baptism for America, and a baptism by blood. And if you read the first lines of Lincoln's 2nd inaugural, which is something I was never prone to do, I just didn't consider myself like a history buff or politically inclined in college or anything like that. You just read these beautiful words that are written about how one nation would make war to preserve slavery, and another one would accept it as the cost of ending the war, and the war came. And you read these words about how every drop of blood drawn with the lash is going to be repaid with blood drawn by the sword in this war. That's not like a specific and direct answer to your question, and I'm not trying to be evasive here. It's just, this is the way that we kind of answer it, I think, as we talk about the human person. What does it mean to be human, to be virtuous? What are the effects of original sin on fallen man? How do those things manifest in the world and throughout history? And in a way, I think it really is a sort of just beautiful and kind of integrated answer to a lot of these concerns that certainly plague our world today. So.
Great. Any other questions that people have, either in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a live question if that's more comfortable for you.
Danny, there was one question about the art, music classes in foreign languages. I don't know that we answered that one.
Oh, thank you.
have-
I must not have seen that. Oh, I scrolled up. I'm sorry. Great. So specific art and music classes. So yeah, I'll tackle some of this, but then I would definitely ask others to jump in here. So we do have a formal art class that's offered once a week to all kindergarten through 8 students. And the level of delivery increases for our 7th and 8th grade the second semester. So currently, like right now in the second semester, they have it twice a week, and this is so they can go into greater depth in creating various projects. Traditionally, they've worked on icons in the second semester. Let's see, music classes would take place for twice a week for kindergarten through 3rd grade, and once a week 4th and 5th grades. And then it stops at 5th grade, and I'll ask Mrs. Orhan to just jump in there as she's one of our music instructors.
So the lower grades have it twice a week, but they only have 30 minutes at a time. Our younger grade teacher is a very accomplished musician, and she takes them through kind of, you know, some music that would have gone with their time period, although that does tend to be hard because when you're talking about like kindergarten stage, you know, there's not a whole lot of ancient Mesopotamian recordings, or any for that matter. So, but what they do is they work on their listening skills, they work on hearing and repeating back sound, and that just grows through the years. Once I am the 4th and 5th grade music teacher, so once they're with me, I only actually see them once a week, but it's a longer class period, so I have them for a full 50-minute class period when I see them. And my tasks with them are threefold: to go through and actually talk through some of the music history for the time periods that they have studied and will study, to go and more formally introduce musical theory, and then to train their ears, right? So they're at a higher stage of learning, and to really take those skills that they've learned through, you know, small folk songs and, you know, like, you know, small repetitious songs in the younger grades, and to work those skills at a higher level. Once they get to 6th grade, we don't have an individualized class because there's so much in their schedule throughout the week already. But they do have the option of joining the school choir. They have the option starting in 4th grade of joining the band. And I actually direct a musical every year that is well underway right now. And they have the option of auditioning for that. So there are certainly many. Oh, and we also have a music kids program for any age level that comes into the school and pulls out and does violin or piano lessons throughout the course of the week. So there are plenty of opportunities for them, for our children, to choose to take lessons and to choose music, but it is part of the curriculum K through 5.
Great, thanks, Mrs. Orhan. I'll just add, in terms of foreign language, we use Latin as our official language of the school. That's offered just in the middle school. So grades 4 through 8 have it at different levels of instruction. So it increases as you get older. So it starts with just twice a week for 4th grade, and increases as they get older. So we have a formal instructor. We do have some clubs for other languages that are provided after school. So we currently have a Spanish club. In the past, we've had a French club, and that just depends on interest of students and teachers and adult volunteers to kind of manage those clubs and those offerings. I saw someone asked about a school garden. We currently do not have one. It's something we're very much interested in, and I know Sister Mary Seaton probably has some things to share in this category.
We don't have a school garden right now. I think space is a problem for outdoor space, but my classroom is a veritable garden. I've had children comment on this. Sister, our classroom is a jungle, because pretty much all the surface space that I have on the windowsill and even above the cubbies is all kinds of plants. Some of those are things that we have grown from children's snacks. And even now we have some apple seeds just starting to grow. And it's super fun to watch them. I have some plants that are growing up the wall, and I really like that. But yes, Mr. Flynn, if we have an opportunity for a garden outside, I'm all in. Oh, we do have a maple tree growing in front of the school that started from a seed that one of my students planted. Well, he just brought in a maple seed a couple of years ago and said, sister, what if we plant this one? Great, let's give it a try and see what happens. And sure enough, it grew and grew. And we planted it outside in front of the school last spring, and it's thriving. Small, but thriving. And one day we'll have beautiful leaves out in front of St. Jerome Academy.
I really hope at some point we can have a school garden. It's you know, we're an urban school, you know, in all its senses. So it, you know, it's got great points. But I think more than one of all of us are open to such a thing. It's just a question of how to make it work logistically.
Great. I see someone asked about if a child attends the school K-8, what level of understanding should a parent expect when it comes to the modern world, geopolitics, current events, etc. I would say limited for sure. Most of our emphasis is on the historical arc, which tends to look backwards as opposed to solely focusing on current events. There's not a whole lot of organized discussion around that. I would say it would be indirect or anecdotal at best. I give an example of we do a lot of debates. So the 7th and 8th graders on Friday afternoons will debate things like which is the best form of government and state your reasons why. So they'll take opposing sides on whether they think an absolute monarchy works or a republic. So it's based on the study of what they've learned about already. And so then they're coming together to debate these things. So I'd say there'd be like examples that would be drawn out of some things that the kids actually know that's going on, but not necessarily anything that's coming from the instruction side of us kind of incorporating current modern events into the arena. I would say another example would be political races that take place, like elections, right? So every 4 years, there's obviously an election, everybody knows about it, but we tend to be able to go back in time and show them a separate election that took place in American history so that they can understand the same process that's used to elect a new president. So it's a nice way of getting them involved to know how the process works without shining a light on the current issues that are at play and presenting sides and asking people to choose or any of that. It's more neutral and kind of helps them see historically what's taken place there. I don't know if somebody has something to add there. Go ahead, Meryl.
Do you mind? Or sister, go ahead.
I just wanted to add this, that by looking towards the past, these children are being formed and growing in the intellectual skills that allows them to engage the present and the future with great thoughtfulness and clarity. So while they might not be addressing things like current situations directly at school, they are growing in the thinking skills that really makes them able to understand and deal with them very well.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I being a parent of an 8th grader, I feel like I'm in some ways, a particular perspective to speak to this. And my son's been in the school since he was 4. So what I found having my own discussions is this: it's not as if they don't know what kind of things are going on around them, but I've experienced exactly what Sister's talking about, namely that when you study something that's removed from your own time period, there's a way in which you can look at it more objectively, and it allows you to come back to your own time period and look at your own look at what's going on currently with some context, whether that be, and I think in some ways studying history, it's really effective because it's real events. In fact, in studying literature, it's this way, right? When you look at something which is the product of someone's imagination, a lot of times you can come back and look at something which is happening in reality in a way that gives you a great perspective. So what I've seen with my own children is that no, current events is not an explicit part of the curriculum, but what I've seen in my own dinner table is that when we're discussing current events, which happens pretty frequently at my dinner table, my eighth grader, even my fifth grader, are saying things that I definitely wasn't saying about the current events, and are able to engage in an adult conversation about current geopolitical issues, right? Whether it be current conflicts in different parts of the world, or whether it be issues here in America about particular things, and they're able to draw conclusions and to draw analogies to other things. Danny mentioned specifically picking another presidential election in a presidential election year, and often we try to pick one that has similarities, to this president. Is it an outsider, or are there two really people who are lifelong politicians? And honestly, I've seen so much fruit come from a deep study of a historical presidential election, and an ability to look at current presidential issues, for instance, or to look at current presidential debates in a way that's not rote repeating what they might hear somewhere else, and that's not sort of surfacey, but they're able to engage in a really deep way. So I realize it's anecdotal, but that's what I've seen from my own students, my own children.
Great. Someone asked about school clubs. I'm going to punt that one to Michelle Trudeau to provide some insight there just on some of the offerings.
Yeah, so we have quite a few clubs at school. We weren't able to have them the past 2 years because of COVID restrictions, but we have some clubs that have been going on for a while. Sorry about that. Such as chess club, and we have a Latin club, we have a poetry club, we have a needlework club, we have a art club, and we have a club called Constructing the Universe, which studies a lot of geometry and things that you find in nature. It's a art, nature, science study, and math study. Yes, right. I'm trying to think what else we have. What other?
Well, I think some of the things that Mrs. Orhan also mentioned would fall under that. So that the play, the spring production that's offered, there's a lot of participation in that. Our school band, choir, there's 3 different levels of the choir. So they would fall under that as well.
We also have a newly created orchestra that meets once a week during the month. Each week, that meets once a week, 3 times in the month. And then we also provide an opportunity for kids to take string lessons from a group that comes into our school called Music Kids.
Great. Okay. Someone asked, does the child need to start in first grade or earlier, or can they transfer in? We can certainly have students transfer in. It just depends on availability. Not totally uncommon for that to take place. Just depends on how many seats there are. How much free time, recess time, or to move one's body is there during the school day? So I would say at a minimum, there's an hour break for lunch and recess. So 30-minute recess, 30-minute lunch break, which we strongly encourage them to be themselves to the greatest degree that they can. So great conversation. And then also the reality of being free outdoors to get some fresh air. So they have to use mostly parking lot space, which is available to us, but we do have a playground in addition to the parking lot space. Students in grades 3, I would say K through 3, Montessori through 3rd grade, get an additional window of time many mornings in the morning for a quick snack and or some time outside for an additional recess period. So that depends on the schedule of the day. Certainly the Montessori students are definitely getting out every day. And then it's less and less as you get older, but it just depends on availability. So 4th through 8th grade is just getting that recess and lunch unless they've earned another chance to go outside and get a slight break in the action.
I'll say too that I know a lot of the faculty, and it's been on the faculty's mind. In fact, we had a presentation about it earlier this year, are really cognizant of well, maybe I'll say it 2 ways, of the need for students to have an ability to move in the classroom, and for sort of room to think about how that works. So I don't think I've taught at many different levels in other places actually before I came here, but I've never seen so many students working in the hallway. My class is very much a stand up and move around and get things done. Half the time, other teachers can tell you they come in a room and their students kind of bustling every which way. We in fact had a graduate of St. Jerome's come in and give some professional development, actually, because he went on to get kinesiology degree. Is that right? I'm trying to say it wrong, right? But we actually came in and had a professional who was a graduate of the school come back and talk to us about the cognitive benefits of physical movement, how much just simple things like blood flow and an ability to take small movement breaks during the classroom improve cognition and improve memory. And so I don't know, I think we all kind of took that to heart. I really enjoyed that professional development, and it's something that I really keep trying to remind myself, especially, you know, in the winter months, to like include in what's going on in my classroom. So they do have that formal recess time and stuff like that, but I especially, I've seen a lot of my colleagues really trying to put that in, and I see the good effects of it in my classroom. So I think we're really cognizant of that, and trying to keep that going in the classroom.
Just to add to what Danny and Meryl said, there's also gym class a couple times a week. And I remember my son getting his report card. I think it was as late as 3rd grade. And he was kind of going through his grades, and he's like, but I got an E in PE, which E is for excellent. He was really proud of that grade.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so kindergartners have PE 3 times a week, and then 1st through 8th grade has it twice a week for a full class period each there. Let's say homework. So definitely in the primary grades, homework is minimized for sure. So we do not subscribe to a formula that measures homework in that capacity to try and gauge any level of rigor. So some schools would adopt a program. By example, let's say 1st grade has 10 minutes, 2nd grade has 20 minutes, and you just keep going up the line. And there's always homework assigned in those categories. So we do not have a magic formula like that. Rather, we would say homework is something, it's a game the whole family can play, in the sense that what they're learning throughout the day should be driving healthy conversations that parents can glean about what the child has learned over the dinner table. So in fact, one of our 4th grade teachers sends out a daily email to the parents and says, here's really simple questions you can ask your children at the dinner table to drive discussion precisely exactly on what we studied today. And that's the whole point, is to engage and keep the parents as the active primary educators that they are, by keeping them looped in and knowing what's going on, and not proposing that a student is spending 2, 3, 4 hours in their room at a desk just grinding things out from a book or a textbook or a packet. So it could be observational, it could be reading. Of course, there's math homework that every child needs to do to practice. So there's things that are part of routine that need to happen. But I would say, by and large, there's some projects that are assigned with plenty of a window to complete them in. And then there's regular homework in the evenings for math and reading. I would say those would be the 2 primary goods there. But we're talking, I think the question was for K through 5, definitively under an hour for sure, if at all, every night. I would say it's very limited in those grades. Is it possible for a parent to observe the school day? The answer is yes, and visit days. I think Chris Curry is going to get into that at the end about following up, should you choose to do some of those things. Discipline. So we have a formative discipline the school that centers around the human person. So with a rich, deep understanding of Christian anthropology, our goal is to form the child, to form the person, and to help them heal from whatever their decision was, to help them see what they did, to help them reflect on it, to be remorseful, to apologize, and to make amends, and to avoid that sin in the future, right? So this is in many ways like the Christian notion of how to learn from our mistakes, right? And it plays out. And if we could stop sin at the door, I would every day. Trust me, I stand at the front door most days. But kids are kids, and they bring things in, and they say things that are hurtful, and they do things that they regret. So it's our job, as is today, a student. He did a few things that he shouldn't have done. I worked with the student for much of the afternoon and spoke to him at length, as well as another teacher that's on the call here. It was a formative moment to help him see. I spoke with both of his parents on the phone for a while and unpacked the seriousness of it. We had some writing assignments to do as a result, and spoke with the other student involved, and there was an apology delivered. So it depends on what happens, but I will say anything that's brought to our attention is treated. It's addressed, and it is dealt with. And our goal, again, is to shape and mold and form students to become children of God, to understand that they're children of God so they can obtain the character and the virtues and the habits that they need ultimately to become saints. So it's a long and complicated process that certainly involves a really rich partnership with parents. I will say that. That's quintessential. In fact, I told the parents on the phone today, this is going to heal over time for this student. We're going to be able to remedy this because the adults in the situation, we're on the same page, we're on the same team working together to resolve this for the betterment of the child. And when that's at play, that's best case scenario. I'm not sure if anybody has anything else to add to that.
I actually want to ask Michelle, would you share, there's that story about the graduate who wrote you the letter? I think that might be apt here. Do you know what I'm talking about?
And what I said today?
No, the graduate who wrote you a letter, it was
Oh,
a frequent
right.
flyer, someone that
Oh,
spent
I'm
some
sorry.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, so there was a student who over the years had come to my office very often for different behavior infractions, so to speak. And I spent a lot of time talking with him. And at the end of 8th grade, he gave me a letter, and he said, thank you for all those times that you talked with me and you worked with me, and I learned a lot. And I really got to know those leather chairs in your office. But it was, he basically was saying it was all for the good, and he felt like he had grown. And even though at the time he didn't enjoy it, he saw where he was now at the end of the process. So, yeah.
So yeah, so it's more long-term. In fact, I had another student from that same class that Michelle was mentioning stop by after school today. He wanted to shoot a basketball in the gym, and he just came into my office and asked if he could do that, which was fine. And we chatted for a minute, and I was reflecting on him and his class in particular, and how we in some ways measured growth. And it wasn't solely about academic progress. It wasn't about test scores. With that group, it was about growth and development in healthy virtues and habits that they saw over time. And I asked him, I said, do you remember there was a time you were in 7th or 8th grade and you came to me because you noticed some behavior that was going on, and you said, and you tried to stop it as a student, and the individual was not listening, and you came to me to bring it to our attention. And we kind of had this moment of, he said, I remember exactly the case. That was 5 years ago. And it was, this time, and I know the kids involved, I know the scenario. And I said, you remember that? And he said, yeah. And he said to me, that was a very formative experience. And this was not a shining star behaviorally, I will say. He came to us, transferred in, I think, in 3rd grade, but he came with, himself, and he had some things to learn. And he would admit, as he did, I think today, that like he grew up a lot in the short window of time that he was at the school. And it took some growing pains, and it took some hard moments and difficult conversations. But I think by the time he graduated, he understood exactly who he was called to be, and the small steps that he needed to take to maintain that over time. So he's a sophomore in high school right now and doing really well on a lot of levels. Great. There's a question that talks about leveraging the community and unique resources in the DC area to advance the curriculum. I'm not totally sure the intention of the question. One way I would answer that, and maybe this is not precisely what you're looking for, is making use of the downtown region for field trips and participating in different things. So I will say that's definitely in play, of seeing the Smithsonian's and the museums, the monuments. We have an American history recitation that's performed each spring. Our 5th through 8th grade students, it's kind of like a traveling band. It's a mixed period of mostly American, well, it's all American history, but it includes songs, poem, performances, some even dance, live instruments. It lasts between 30 and 40 minutes. And we have taken it on the road. We've performed in front of the Lincoln Memorial, the MLK Memorial, the Washington Memorial, the Capitol, the World War II Memorial. So we've been able to take those kids down there and see the actual monuments, and then participate in some ways like an active live history. So they recite it, they memorize all of these components, and then we invite families down, but it's really just on public display. The beauty is that they memorize it for 5 years in a row, and by the time they graduate, it's still all in their head. It's still right there, exactly where it needs to be.
I'll say too that we've got an ongoing trip every that Mrs. Orhan takes to the NSA, to the Cryptography Museum too, which has been really fruitful for the students. They always come back thinking about that, and in fact, we have a graduate that's interning there now, so he came to meet us when we were on that field trip earlier this year, and that was really beautiful for me to see us having Michelle plan that trip and take them there for all those years and have such a wonderful experience there, and then having a student say, this is something I'd like to work on, and being a high school student and interning there, it was really beautiful. And that traveling band show was up at Gettysburg last year with the recitation, and that was beautiful to see the students stand on the spot where the Gettysburg Address was given there in the cemetery and the monument, and sort of give that speech from their hearts on that spot at Gettysburg. And I actually think we do a really great job of using the beautiful resources we have here, whether it be the academic resources from the universities around here. We had somebody come in who actually had access to moon rocks a few years ago, and come in and actually show the kids some actual moon rocks encased, right? But they came in with all the security paperwork and cases and stuff like that, and we're showing the students some of the moon rocks that the government has archived away from the Apollo missions. And I actually think over the years we've done a really great job of digging around at all the awesome things we have here, and having our students take advantage of that.
Great. I see a question about average number of slots available. I think we'll save that for the end, because we can speak beyond kindergarten as well. And I think Chris is going to share a couple components there as far as that goes. I'll jump down to student growth and achievement measured. I would say this is in a myriad of facets. So our students do participate in standardized testing. I would say our 2nd through 8th graders, do take standardized tests. It's called the MAP test, at a minimum twice a year, and for certain students 3 times a year. But I would say that's far from measuring their achievement given throughout the year. We would see that as kind of like a picture, a moment in time. It tells us some things. It certainly doesn't tell us everything. I would say there's informal observations, there's formal assessments, informal assessments. There's certainly behavioral changes. We do use like formal systems to communicate things to parents. So the example would be something as easy as progress reports and report cards. And our report cards are going out at the end of this week. So parents do have access to those. But I would say really kind of the bread and butter, the hallmark of trying to measure the growth and the development of the human person really comes out in something called the Student Assistance Team. And this is a group, a subset of our staff that meets every single Monday after school and walks through the roster of a given class or a given grade in that particular meeting. And we look at the analysis of all different angles that are affecting the child, spiritual, social, family, academic, stress, anxiety, health, all of those different facets that affect the student. And we try and develop a plan to make sure that they are growing, they are developing. So in particular cases, if there's a diagnosis, then we have documentation in hand to help guide and direct our next moves. If there's not, we can still build some accommodations, some simpler plans to put into play, and that helps us measure our growth that we're seeing in the child, and we report back to the parents regularly on the progress that's being made in those settings. Outside of that, we tend to use just something called the rule of threes. So if a teacher notices, let's say, 2 low quiz grades and a missing homework assignment, or a missed project and 2 missing homework assignments, the parent's going to get a phone call or an email to find out where things are, what the status of the situation is, see which ways we can help and step in. So those are some markers for sure. But I would say we're definitely not a school that hangs our hat on, a GPA for the class or how many are in honor roll, or what the standardized test scores might be. We would say there's so much more to the human person than solely those measurements. Great. Those are the questions that I can see, unless I skipped some. Okay, well, I'm going to turn things over to Chris Curry at this point, who has a few comments and follow-up steps for those interested in learning or finding out more about our school and or the process of applying to the school. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Danny. Try to be brief, so I know we're a little over time here. The first thing is that if you have any questions about enrollment events or the admissions process, you can reach out to me directly. I think almost all of you probably got something from me that allowed you to register for this evening. And it should have in my signature line has my email address and my cell phone number. You can call me or email me anytime. If not, call the school and they can put you in touch with me. The second thing is that we do have additional enrollment events occurring. Especially the school visits are ongoing every Thursday morning. You do have to register for these events by using the same link that you registered for this one. There's a schedule of the remaining Thursday morning school tours. You can register for those as well. Now, as far as if you've already discerned and you decided that you want to apply for your child, the admissions process is 3 parts. I'll describe them briefly. Basically, it all occurs online on a website run by the TAD service. So you go onto the website, you register for TADS, and then you will click on an admissions tab and then make an online application. There's a set of required documents for you to submit. You can scan paper documents or take photos of them to digitize them, and then you can upload them directly to the site under the required documents tab. There's an application fee of $50 that can be paid online or paid through the mail. The important date to remember is February 15th. That's the deadline for consideration for first admissions. We will have rolling admissions after our first admissions, but almost all the classes are likely to be waitlisted by that time. So if you want to maximize your chances of your child getting in, please try to apply by February 15th. There's one more step after the application and the required documents, and that's a 15-minute Zoom conversation with Danny Flynn. We will send out an invitation for that with a sign-up form for everybody who's applied by February 15th, and those conversations will be scheduled for the latter part of February. Admissions decisions will be made in early March, and then you'll be notified if your child's accepted from TADS by email with a link to an enrollment form. For those who are not accepted immediately and put on the waiting list, will get an email from me explaining what the waiting list is and what the child's prospects might be from that point. If you do get accepted, you have 2 weeks to fill out the enrollment form. Everybody who doesn't fill out the form will go back onto the waiting list, and then we'll admit additional students from the waiting list to take those spots. The last stage is the tuition agreement. There is a financial aid application also on TADS. If you click on the financial aid form, if you fill out one of those forms, then you'll be considered for financial aid. We go through that process over a period of several weeks. We do give out about $1.3 million in financial aid every year. We really try to make sure that no student is denied this education due to a lack of affordability. When we send those tuition agreements out finally in May, again, there's 2 weeks to sign the agreement and pick a tuition payment plan. If the family does not sign within that period, then their spot opens up again and we'll make more admissions. So basically, we'll continue to make some admissions really through the spring, and then, certainly even the summer, if a family moves away, we'll have additional spots that will open up and we'll go ahead and admit for them. So don't feel like if you're not admitted right at first admissions that you don't have any chance. But again, your best chance is if you apply by first admissions. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, and if you have questions afterwards, please do contact me by phone or email. Thank you.
Great. Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. We'll just wrap up and conclude here with a simple prayer and call it a night.